what to talk about this time. Something that I read over and over again is not just the conflation of Freemasonry with the rites, like the York Rite and Scottish Rite, etc. People always want to try to somehow link Freemasonry and Kabbalah. They have nothing to do with each other. There's nothing about Kabbalah that is Masonic. Um, I mean, it could be an interesting topic to discuss in your lodge sometime as a paper, but Freemasonry is not Kabbalistic. Freemasonry is not it's not Jewish. Freemasonry has nothing to do with Judaism or Zionism or any of that stuff. Um, and so I want to talk through uh, or just pose some assertions and ideas here that you're welcome uh, to push back on, or hopefully you'll find interesting. Okay. Um, first of all, it should be noted that the Kabbalah is a religious sort of tool that is used specifically to study Jewish scriptures. Um, so if you're not reading the Torah or the Zohar or the what is it, the Sefer Yetzirah, um, there's nothing Kabbalistic going on. Okay, and so you get these guys who, like I was in the Rosicrucians for a while, for many a year. They are just obsessed with Kabbalah. There's nothing Kabbalistic about Christianity. So there were moments in time where, um, you know, guys were trying to blend Christianity and Kabbalah, but it's just ridiculous. It doesn't work, and they have nothing to do with each other. And so what happens is these guys try to bring Kabbalah into the lodge, and they just end up perverting and deforming both. So they completely make a fool of themselves as Kabbalists, but then they also just completely deform Freemasonry because it has nothing to do with Kabbalah. Freemasonry is not syncretistic. Um, Syncretism is where you just kind of pick and choose what you want, and then you make some new religion out of it. Freemasonry is not a religion, as we said before. It is religious because it's Christian. It is a Christian confraternity, but it's not its own religion. There is no unique God to the Masons. And in fact, the whole lodge is basically, again, a representation of the crucifixion and the life of Jesus Christ. Freemasonry is not perennial philosophy. Freemasonry does not accept all beliefs and behaviors. Um, Freemasonry Freemasonry doesn't exclude good men because of the fact that they're not Christian. But again, you shouldn't confuse that with the idea that the lodge welcomes other religious concepts or ideas. It doesn't. Freemasonry is strictly Christian. Um, and let's not forget that the whole tree of life thing, or these Kabbalistic nodes, that doesn't even occur until the 1200s, where they basically just ripped off Pythagoras. So they took the Pythagorean tetractys and then they just kicked it into a series of I mean, it actually ends up being two cubes if you map it out. So the detectors, everybody thinks they're so clever when they see the cube in there. Well, no kidding, you're supposed to. I mean, the reason this diagram is important is not because of your elemental observations. They're actually mathematical uh, uh, truths that you can yield out of this diagram. But that aside, the whole thing about Christian Kabbalah is kind of a joke, and I want to move on here. But the Kabbalah and Masonry are not the same thing. Again, no, especially in the Rosicrucians, they love to talk about this 11th node. These these are Freemasons, remember? So these are guys who don't actually read anything. What they do is they just use hearsay, or they do an internet search, or these are your typical kind of Reddit idiots. And so let's read from the Sefer Yetzirah here. 10 Sephirot, 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. No, you mystical morons. There is no 11th node. But again, like all rights, independent bodies, they were too stupid for Freemasonry. And so they just ran off to whatever seemed mystical or interesting or whatever. because the more complicated and the more incoherent something is, the more these credulous people are likely to want to be a part of it. Uh, yes, this is what you do with Kabbalah. Okay, you study Jewish scriptures. If you want to study Kabbalah, Freemasonry is not for you. There are actual schools where you go and study the Kabbalah, which is where you should be, not in a lodge. Again, fascinating, topic to discuss as a concept. Um, but you get these idiots who want to start integrating and applying Kabbalah to Freemasonry. These people are frauds. They're not real Freemasons. Um, I put this picture here just because I'm not just some random person who decided uh to tell these people off. Like I spend time with people who study Kabbalah. I spend time with people who write books about Kabbalah. So these are some wonderful people. I got to spend some time with Daniel Matt, who wrote this Essential Kabbalah book. He wrote some of the most beautiful editions of the Zohar. So if that's what you're interested in, I recommend you go do that because you're wasting your time in Freemasonry and you're also wasting everybody else's time in Freemasonry. So if you want to study Kabbalah, go study it somewhere else. Why is it such a big deal in Freemasonry? As usual, not because of actual Freemasonry, but because of the fat, stupid slobs like Albert Pike who decided that they wanted to impose it onto Freemasonry. And remember, this is during the 1800s when he's, potting around. This is when syncretism, this is when perennial wisdom, this is when the secret doctrine and all of this other garbage uh, is just floating around. And of course, Masons, the typical Freemason has never been known to be a very disciplined, intelligent, or interesting person. So they are happy to be spoon-fed whatever, uh, as long as they feel like they're included, as long as they feel like they're knowledgeable, they'll suck it up. Um, but that's what happened with this Masonic chart of disease. It's not as obvious here, but really what they're trying to do is they're trying to make these three rows align with the York Rite, the Scottish Rite, and all of this goofy, stupid stuff in between. All of this is garbage. It's a complete waste of time. And what happens is if you're too stupid for 3 degrees, that's why you have to wander off into this bullshit. So, um, if you have any dignity, leave the rights. Just let them crash and burn because they're garbage, and they're really for people who not only don't care about Freemasonry but are too dumb to be in it in the first place. And I would also note that where the Blue Lodge actually, not even the Blue Lodge, the original rituals, and I'll use Preston here, he does a very good job of applying the progressive Euclidean template to Freemasonry. So a progressive science is something like Euclid's Elements, where each step prepares you for the next one. This is just a mess of crap. You do all of these degrees, nobody knows what's going on, right? These are for these people who waste their time in these appendant bodies. Like they can't remember their first obligation, but they've decided that they're going to go on and take 32, 33 extras. So again, the rights are a joke. Leave them, let them die. And here we go. I took this from this copy of Morals and Dogma, but just to read it here, all truly dogmatic religions have issued from the Kabbalah, all of them, amazing, and returned to it. Everything scientific and grand in the religious dreams of the Illuminati. Um, Jacob Burma, Swedenborg, Saint-Martin, and others is borrowed from the Kabbalah. I would have you know, uh, everyone he just listed there is an idiot. And they're helpful to read about to understand failures in history. But the idea that he's like lifting up Swedenborg, like what a joke. Borrowed from the Kabbalah and all the Masonic associations owe to it their secrets and their symbols. No, they don't. Albert Pike, you piece of crap. You are Albert Pike was a man of his time. Okay. So again, all of this nonsense was going around during his time. And how can I, how can I make this positive somehow? I think it's impressive that he was able to produce these, encyclopedic volumes of his thoughts. And so, in a sort of, in the sense that he, I'm sure he worked very hard to put these things together. But unfortunately, like your typical modern Mason, like he did absolutely no, there was no background checking, there was no, testing, there was, he just took whatever he heard and he like wrote it down and was like, that's true. And that's not the way it works. And so I'm, well, I think ultimately he's sort of a useless idiot. Uh, I think the fact that this level of stupidity doesn't even register for the modern Mason, like they're so stupid, they can't even understand how stupid the Scottish Rite is, especially Morals and Dogma, which is I mean, it's basically again, it's good for a laugh. It's fun to use when you're trying to correct the errors of previous writers. It could also be great for, starting a bonfire. But the book itself is crap. And Pike was really, I mean, he's no one to learn from, to be honest with you. But then you have these droves of Scottish Rite Masons who, again, they just think they think he's so profound. And yet not only have most of them never actually read the book, none of them have taken the time to ask, well, is this really true? Is this really right? Because just nonstop, I hear you idiots. Kabbalah, Kabbalah, Kabbalah. You're the third pillar. The um, well, I won't get into that because it's a different topic, but please, Kabbalah and Masonry have nothing to do with each other. If you want to study Kabbalah, go and actually do that, but don't bring it into Freemasonry. It's not where it belongs. This is another thing I found funny. I talk with Masons who they're perfectly comfortable with the idea that they're a Gnostic, that they are, a Kabbalist, and all of these other things, but they don't seem like it doesn't register for them that Gnosticism was a Christian heresy and the Kabbalah that they're studying is a Christian Kabbalah. So these guys who they did like they talk about how, oh, Christianity is bad and only stupid people are Christians, blah blah blah. It's like, do you not hear yourself speak? You're you're literally LARPing as a derivative fake Christian while you complain about Christianity. So again, maybe if these guys actually read the Bible, if they actually learned about Christianity, they would have some sort of better understanding of how kind of stupid they are, right? Because again, the Gnostics were heretical Christian sects. Um, you have Pico di Mirandola, who Masons, the esoteric Masons love to cite. And what did he write in his 900 Theses? No science can better convince us of the divinity of Jesus Christ. So again, even if you're one of these idiots who wants to pretend that Freemasonry is this, Kabbalistic, esoteric, mystical group, well, literally the guys who wrote the nonsense that you love so much were, God-fearing, Christ-loving Christians. So let that sink in and maybe go sit in front of the mirror for a little bit and ask yourself who you are and why you thought that being a Mason was for you. Um, Johannes Reuchlin, he wrote the Christian or Catholic Kabbalah. So again, guys, get yourself straightened out, understand the terms you're using, and stop trying to bring into the lodge what does not belong. Remember, health is about what you reject. Health is about what you don't include. Freemasonry is not about including you. It's not about including your fake spirituality. It's not about including your interests. It's not about including your reprobate identity in the world. It's about, do you want to become a Freemason yourself? Because if you don't, go somewhere else. Get out of Freemasonry. You just you're a sickness to it. Um, this is just some more, you know, ammunition against Albert Pike, and you'll see why here in a minute. But in his Morals and Dogma, he's talking about the Pythagorean doctrine of metempsychosis, and he says this is a doctrine of Pythagorean who learned it when he received the Egyptian mysteries. Note that that's a bunch of horse crap right there. And it was the doctrine of all of ceremonial initiation thought to purify thy soul, blah blah blah. Hence sprung the doctrine of transmigration of souls. That's the metempsychosis, which Pythagoras taught as an allegory. Plato, like him, now he's slandering Plato, drew his doctrines from the East and the mysteries. Okay, Pike, you just Pike is extremely disappointing, but what's even more disappointing and embarrassing and disgraceful are all the Scottish Rite Masons who I guess are just, I don't know what to call you guys because you're idiots. So let's use some actual research here, okay? This is from Lore and Science and Ancient Pythagoreanism. Walter Burkert, if you're a Mason, that should be a household name for you. But in his Lore and Science, he writes, Herodotus ascribed to the Egyptians a fully developed theory of metempsychosis, and since the Egyptians never had such a doctrine, it's clear that Greek ideas are being projected onto foreigners. This is exactly what happens in Masonry. There's nothing to do with Kabbalah and Masonry. But people who don't know what they're talking about, who don't know what they're doing, they then ascribe these false ideas to this thing that they're not, they're fakes, right? These people shouldn't be Masons. Most of all because they refuse to learn. When I talk to people, and I don't start out harsh. I try to be nice. And I get this uh people spread this impression of me that I'm just like a trouble, like I'm just there to start trouble. I'm not. But if you're going to be an asshole idiot, I am going to push you. So when I say what is Freemasonry and you tell me it's this Kabbalistic, esoteric, blah, 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 now I've got a problem with you. And the longer that you can't answer my questions, the more I'm going to hammer down on you because you're a joke. Yeah. And of course, I always get the, well, but, and I brought this slide in because I actually had the pleasure of attending an event with Rex Hutchins many years ago. Very nice guy. He destroyed me when we played chess multiple times. But even Rex, right, who is uh, a very sweet guy, he passed, which I'm sad to say, years ago. But there's nobody in the Scottish Rite that I would take as serious research or serious researcher. But even he, in his book, says having only his faulted Grecian sources, believe the Egyptians had true mystery cults older than their own. Pike didn't understand. The Egyptians did not have initiates as such who were invested with esoteric knowledge. All this to say, there were no mystery schools in ancient Egypt. Okay. All of these stupid ideas where Plato and Pythagoras traveled to Egypt and studied with the mat. This is all bullshit. Okay. And and all of this comes from this syncretistic, idiotic nonsense, the steaming pile of shit that is the secret doctrine, and the idiotic books that that Pico and these other people wrote. And I'm gonna get to that in a moment, but a true Freemason doesn't just read something and say, "Oh, it says it in Morals and Dogma, so it must be true." The true Freemason says, "Why are you teaching this? What is the point of you explaining this to me?" And then saying, "If you're explaining it to me, is it true?" Right? So I really need you guys to get to do better here. Pythagoras, this is from Sir Thomas Heath's Manual of Greek Mathematics. Pythagoras learned a few geometrical facts rather than geometry, and there is no trace of any attempt by them to give proof or of any rule. They had no idea of geometry as demonstrative science. And I think that's important because all the time I get these guys who are like, well, they found a Babylonian tablet with the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, yes. This is all practical app. Pythagoras gets the award of having the theorem named after him because he's the one who established the deductive proof. He's the one who made the theorem. Okay. These other cultures didn't do that. And if we I'll just say, like, it's interesting to me that you people are so quick to believe in this like ancient mystical wisdom. And yet, why is it that we don't learn Egyptian mathematics today? Why is it that we don't do these things? Oh, well, who knows? They were amazing mystical knowledge holders for however long, and then suddenly it all just ended, right? Okay. What of this can we relate to Egyptian geometry? Absolutely nothing. So this is a wonderful book if you can pick it up, Pythagoras and the Early Pythagoreans by Leonid Zmud. Um, there is no evidence of a journey to the Orient by Pythagoras, which is at all reliable. Though this conclusion is not new, it was drawn in the second half of the 19th century and has been confirmed many times. Guys, when Plato talks about Egyptian myths and such, he's not evangelizing for Egyptian uh, ritual practices. He's using the myth to make a point. So no, these guys didn't travel to Egypt. They didn't even speak the language. Okay, Plato didn't. The idea that these guys traveled and then learned the language and then were taught some secret mystery tradition and then came back and then suddenly Egypt and these other places sort of fade out of existence, right? There's no continuation of them. It's stupid in and of itself, but there are good there are strong sources that should help us to realize that it's not true, right? And when we read Plato, we probably shouldn't take him literally when he says that, the universe is a giant spindle. Okay, we should be able to take that concept and understand that it's an abstraction. That's the toughest part for Masons is they fail to abstract anything. Everything is like super literal. And again, that's why they needed 33 more degrees or 29 more degrees because they couldn't figure that out in the first three. The publication of the 1870s Rhiine papyrus demonstrated the primitive nature of Egyptian geometry. So you guys love to, this is one I hear a lot about the Rhiine papyrus. That actually that actually was demonstrative of the fact that Egyptian mathematics were not advanced. They were primitive, right? Because in most of what Egypt had were arithmetic mathematics. Okay, it was adding and subtracting. It wasn't measuring angles and solving for proofs. And just real quick, this is another frustrating aspect. Greece didn't have a holy book, right? The Christians have the Bible. The Jews have, the Torah. The Muslims have the Quran. Greek didn't have a holy book. There was no Book of the Olympians. Okay, there were myths and poems and dialogues and histories and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but there was no single book except for the geometry book. Euclid's Elements is the book. It's the Greek book, so to speak. Um, and again, Euclid was taught from 300 BC up until about the 1980s when he was removed for more standardized testing and curriculum. So I actually think that's a part of the reason that education is sort of constantly declining is because we don't teach Euclid, which we really should bring that back to schools. All right, this is where it gets fun and interesting. If time allows, I highly recommend you get all of these books, and I highly recommend you know these two are kind of a slog. You don't need to comb through them fine, super finely, but um, understand the basis of them, and then read Stolen Legacy. It's a lot of fun. Okay. After you read Stolen Legacy, then you don't need to read Black Athena. I recommend it. It's an interesting book. Um, but read Black Athena and then read Not Out of Africa. Read it in that order, if you can. And I'll tell you why. Um, The Life of Sethos was a French fantasy novel by this Abby Jean Terrasson. I hope I didn't pronounce that incorrectly, in the 1730s. This is where this is where the hardcore belief in Egyptian mystery schools technically originates. Okay. And again, this was a French fantasy novel, so it wasn't even meant to be taken seriously. It was just a fun fiction that you read, like, for adventure or whatever. Well, then this guy, the Reverend Charles Vale, in the 1900s, he writes this book, The Ancient Mysteries of Modern Masonry. And he uses this book as his source in as he's explaining the Egyptian mystery schools, because he either decided that this wasn't a fantasy novel, or he kind of lost the plot. But then we get to Stolen Legacy, and this book is quite a read, let me tell you. And in this book, the author the author wants to say that Plato and Socrates and Pythagoras and all these guys actually stole Egyptian and African culture, and then somehow like stop them from ever advancing. And so everything you read in Plato and Socrates and Pythagoras, et cetera, this is all actually stolen wisdom. How you steal wisdom, I'm not quite sure either, but read the book. It's interesting. But here's where it gets messy, because Martin Bernal wrote Black Athena in the 80s, and like Pike and like the stupid Kabbalists in Masonry, he did no actual research on where he was getting his information from. And so he took from Stolen Legacy the complete idiocy of Egyptian mystery schools, which took from the Reverend Vale's Masonic book, Egyptian Mystery Schools, which took from the Abby Jean Terrasson's fantasy novel about uh, Egyptian mystery schools. Okay. Now, is all of this comes to light in Mary Lefkowitz's Not Out of Africa, which is also a fun book to read. Um, but it is fun because this is Masonry is religious and it is political. All right. And I I don't like, as much as I can, I don't like boxing things in because it's so much more. But if I could reduce it down to just sort of like a soundbite, Freemasonry is Christian conservative, is what it is. It's Christian conservatism. Um, and the fact that we have people like Albert Pike, who was a syncretistic idiot, the fact that we have these lost, bizarro Kabbalists wandering around in Freemasonry, um, the fact that all of this happens is due to errors like this, where the men in Freemasonry are kind of so weak and stupid, they don't know how to defend it. They don't know how to protect it. They don't even know how to truly pass it on. Okay. So all they can do is sort of feel good about themselves because they were word perfect on the lecture. Or again, they have to succeed sort of administrative success. Like, we got two new members. Great. Those guys aren't going to do anything or go anywhere anyway. So not sure we're excited. But that said, uh, one of the chapters in Lefkowitz's books is how did the myth of an Egyptian mystery system come to be preserved in Freemasonry? And she gives us this. In the around 1460, there was a Greek manuscript which contained the Hermetic treatises, which again was a bunch of fake nonsense. And then Cosmo de Medici thought that it was more important to translate them than Plato because Egypt was before Greece. So the logic here is these are more important because Egypt is first chronologically. All right. That in itself is stupid. Just because something is older doesn't mean that it has any value, doesn't mean that it's interesting or uh, really has any sort of relevant impact on what came after it. But yeah, as a result, the Hermetic corpus was given serious attention, and its fictions were widely accepted as truth. How many times do we have to hear about Hermeticism and Freemasonry? All the time. It's obnoxious. It's really stupid. It's right up there with, Kabbalah and the other stuff. Freemasonry is not Hermeticism. Were there a bunch of idiots in Freemasonry who were like occultist, esoteric people, and they claimed to bring their nonsense into the lodge? Yes, of course there were. But that doesn't change what the lodge is. Okay, the lodge has nothing to do with Kabbalah. The lodge has nothing to do with any of the rites or appendant bodies. The lodge has nothing to do with Hermeticism. All interesting topics to discuss, to unpack, to work with amongst yourselves, as long as you have the discipline and as long as you have the mental capacity not to let them bleed into what Freemasonry actually is. Okay. Just a couple of excerpts from Stolen Legacy. The Egyptian temple, blah, blah, blah. The doctrine of self-knowledge for centuries attributed to Socrates is now definitely known to have originated from the Egyptian temples. Yeah, that's a bunch of bullshit. Man, know thyself, right? Um, and then this one, this lofty culture system of the black people filled Rome with envy, and consequently, she, which is Rome, legalized Christianity, which she had persecuted for 5 long centuries, and set it up as a state religion as a rival of the mysteries. There were no mysteries, guy. And Christianity wasn't set up as a rival. Okay. It's it's a fun book. I recommend you read it. The definitive edition too. This is one of the other excerpts from the book. And it's just, again, this is the same kind of stuff we saw with Albert Pike. All right. And I'll read this here. Alexander the Great, who by an act of aggression invaded Egypt in 333, ransacked and looted the royal library at Alexandria, and together with his companions carried off a booty of scientific, philosophic, and religious books. And what's important to note here, and this is what Mary points out as well. So Alexander the Great died in 323 BC. Okay. The Library of Alexandria wasn't built until 283 BC. So how did he sack a library that was named after him 40 years after he died? Right? It's really sloppy. And it's unfortunate that this is not only being passed off as wisdom, but it's like it's being set up as some sort of, some mystical wisdom where, oh no, the Greeks really stole everything. And you know, that's why nobody knows about the ancient Egyptian mystery schools. Well, no, the ancient Egyptians had funerary rites. They didn't have initiations. There are no mystery schools in Egypt until well after the Greeks are established there. Okay? Or the Romans, who then had Greek mystery schools in Egypt with them. What is Freemasonry? It's an academic religious tradition, Trinitarian Christian morality, Socratic philosophical allegory, and Euclidean geometric symbols. Um, the term would be this Latin, this philosophia ancilla theologiae. Philosophy is the handmaid to theology, and the Masonic Lodge is the handmaid to the church. Again, this is why Freemasonry is religious, but it is not a religion, because it is a Christian confraternity made up of only those 3 degrees. And so please, the next time someone starts talking about Kabbalah, the next time somebody starts talking about Hermeticism, the next time somebody just wants to sort of like, slap some Sephiroth nodes on the pillars, drill into them extremely hard, press them to explain where that comes from, ask them where in the ritual they got that from, and what's going to happen is they're slowly going to unwind and realize that they're full of crap. So thanks again. Cheers, and have a great rest of the day.